My name is Nora Whitfield, and at 71 years old, I thought I knew every sound my little beach house could make. The creak of the front steps in winter, the rattle of the loose kitchen window in a storm, the way the old screen door slept shut behind my late husband when he came in from fishing. Those sounds were the soundtrack of my life. That afternoon, when I pulled into the driveway after a 3-day visit with an old friend, the house made a sound I had never heard before. Hammers. Not one or two, but a hard, frantic chorus of them beating through the salt air like a warning. There was a white pickup truck in my driveway I didn't recognize, and sheets of plywood leaning against my porch rail. My flower pots had been shoved into a corner. Dirt spilled across the boards. For a second, I just sat there in my car, hands wrapped around the steering wheel, trying to convince myself I had pulled up to the wrong house. I hadn't. My windshield was still hanging by the door. The little ceramic gull my husband bought me on our 30th anniversary chipped on one wing. I grabbed my overnight bag, more out of habit than intention, and stepped up onto the porch. The boards vibrated under my feet. I opened the front door, and the smell of sawdust hit me so hard it felt personal. My kitchen was a disaster zone. The oak cabinets my husband and I had stained together were gone, ripped clean off the walls. The counter was a bare strip of scarred plywood. There were toolboxes on my dining table, and someone had stacked my framed family photos in a cardboard box like they were junk from a yard sale. A man in a dusty t-shirt squeezed past me carrying a length of 2x4. "Watch your step, ma'am," he said, like I was a stranger wandering through a construction site. Before I could answer, I heard her voice. "Nora, you're back already." My daughter-in-law, Chloe, appeared at the end of the hall, holding a fan of paint swatches. There was a smear of drywall dust on her cheek like war paint. She smiled quick and bright, the way you do when you've been caught doing something you hope you can't explain away. "What is all this?" I asked. My voice sounded small in my own house. She glanced around as if I should already know, then said lightly, "We got started on the remodel. Ryan thought it'd be better to move fast. This place is going to be perfect once we open it up for our family." I stared at her. "For your family?" She shifted the paint cards from one hand to the other. "Well, our family," she corrected, then added with a little laugh that made my skin prickle, "This is our home now, Nora. We're just making it work for us." I stood at the edge of my kitchen trying to steady my breathing, though the air was thick with dust and the bitter smell of fresh cut lumber. It felt strange to stand in a room I had lived in for more than 40 years and not recognize a single surface the contractors had left for the day, and the sudden silence made everything worse. Silence meant I could hear myself think, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. The sun was dropping low behind the dunes, throwing long slants of orange light across the debris on my floor. A piece of my old cabinet door lay near the fridge, the honey-cold finish, chipped and splintered. I walked over, crouched down, and ran a finger along the jagged edge. My husband had sanded that door 3 times because he wanted it smooth enough for a baby's cheek. I didn't have the heart to touch it again. Behind me, I heard footsteps. When I turned, Ryan was leaning against the doorway, his shoulders slumped in, the way they used to when he came home with a bad report card. Except now he was 38 years old with tired eyes and drywall dust on his sweatshirt. "Mom," he said, "I know this looks messy, but it'll be good when it's done." "Really good?" I didn't say anything. I just kept staring at him, waiting for the part where he admitted he'd made a mistake, or at least apologized for starting renovations without telling me. That part never came. He pushed his hands into his pockets and looked around the room like he was showing it to a realtor. "We're opening the space, knocking out that wall over there so Liam can have a play area. Chloe wants to add more natural light. It'll feel more modern, open concept." The words open concept scraped at me. I had worked my whole life for this house. One carefully chosen piece at a time. Nothing about it needed to be reimagined. Ryan, I finally said, why didn't you call me? Why did you start all of this? Without asking? He blinked as if the question confused him. Mom, we did talk about it. Remember? I said we were thinking about moving in for a while. I thought you knew this was the plan. A sharp ache settled beneath my ribs. Thinking about it is not the same as tearing out my kitchen. He let out a long breath, staring at the floor. We needed to move quickly. Contractors had an opening and this place needs updating anyway. It's too much work for you alone. There it was, the gentle nudge toward helplessness, the implication that age made me incapable. I crossed my arms and looked at him, trying to catch even a flicker of guilt in his expression. All I saw was exhaustion. A door shut, somewhere down the hall, and Chloe appeared, wiping her hands with a rag. We were just talking about the plans, she said brightly. I know it's a lot of change, Nora, but it's going to be great. For all of us. All of us. That phrase. Again, as if I were just one branch in a family tree they were pruning without permission. She brushed dust from her scrubs and walked to the half-demolished wall. See here, we're taking this down to make a bigger living space. It'll be so much better for Liam. Kids need room to run. I stared at the empty space where my china cabinet had stood for decades. Where are my things? Chloe blinked quickly. Oh, they're safe. We packed everything into boxes and moved them into the garage. We didn't want anything to get damaged. There was something too cheerful in the way she said it, as if packing away a woman's life could be done with the same enthusiasm as setting up a yard sale. My throat tightened. You should have asked. Ryan shifted uneasily. Mom, please don't be upset. We're trying to help. You've been alone out here for so long. We thought this would be a fresh start for everyone. Being alone wasn't the problem. Being pushed aside was. I walked past them into the hallway, needing space to think. Picture frames hung crooked, probably jostled during demolition. I reached out to straighten one. The three of us at the lighthouse 20 years ago when Ryan was still laughing easily and Chloe wasn't in the picture yet. I held the edge of the frame until my hand stopped shaking from the living room. I heard them whispering something about deadlines, something about money. I didn't catch everything, but I caught enough to know this renovation wasn't just a fresh start. It was part of a larger, heavier problem they hadn't told me about. I stood there alone in my hallway with a sinking realization that my son hadn't simply made a careless decision. He had made a desperate one. The house groaned as the evening wind pushed against the siding. A long, low sound like an old animal settling in pain. It echoed exactly how my chest felt. I knew right then that whatever had begun in my home wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was the start of a battle I never wanted, but one I couldn't afford to ignore. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the shock and confusion, a small flame of anger began to burn, steady and bright. The house always settled after sunset, but that night it felt like it was groaning under the weight of something heavier than the wind. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my guest room, though now it looked more like a storage closet someone had tried to disguise as a bedroom. A narrow, twin bed was pushed against the wall, too short for me to stretch out on comfortably. A single lamp sat on a nightstand that didn't belong there. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and old cedar. Ryan had shown me the room, like he was offering a thoughtful surprise. It's quieter back here, Mom, he said. You'll sleep better. Better than where? Better than my own bedroom, my room, the space my husband and I shared for decades. The place where his fishing boots once left sand on the rug and where I kept a photo of us on our wedding day on the nightstand. The room they'd moved me into didn't have any of that. No ocean view, no breeze, no memory of the life I'd lived. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on The thin blanket. It had a detergent. Smell that didn't belong to me. Everything felt wrong, as if I had stepped sideways into a version of my life where I had no voice. For a moment, I tried to swallow the lump rising in my throat. I was 71 years old. I had survived losing my husband. I had survived countless nights alone in this house without fear. But something about being tucked into a corner room like an afterthought made me feel smaller than I had in years. I lay down not because I was tired but because I didn't know what else to do. No. The thump of tools being moved outside echoed faintly. The crew must have been loading equipment into their truck. Every metallic clang made my stomach twist tighter. I hadn't eaten since lunchtime, but the idea of food made me nauseous. The house grew quiet, completely quiet. The kind of quiet that amplifies every doubt in your head. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the faint water stain near the light fixture, the one Ryan always promised to fix but never did. I wondered if that stain was next on their list of things to replace right after my kitchen, my living room, and apparently my say in any of it. Time blurred. I shifted on the mattress, trying to find a comfortable position, but the springs dug into my hip. Every part of me felt displaced, unwelcome. I rolled onto my side, and that's when I noticed it. A thin line of warm light seeping from the bottom of the closet door. It wasn't bright, just a glow, barely noticeable, unless the room was dark and still like this one. I frowned, pushing myself up and walking toward it. My feet were cold against the floorboards. I opened the door slowly. Inside, a small lamp sat perched on the top shelf, pointing toward a stack of papers and folders. They weren't mine. My handwriting was nowhere in sight. I pulled the top folder down and carried it to the bed. The paper clip at the top was bent as if someone had been flipping through it in a hurry. The first page made my heart jolt. Plans, layouts, measurements, a full renovation outline, with my name typed neatly under property owner. My signature was nowhere. Page after page showed the same thing. Detailed construction scheduled for weeks ahead. Costs scrolled in the margins. Notes in Chloe's handwriting, offering alternative fixtures and materials. I flipped to a section, clipped together in the back. Legal documents. A loan inquiry. Something about increased available equity and a sentence that made my vision blur for a second. Pending homeowner consent. Homeowner. Me. Consent not given. I placed the papers beside me and let my hands fall to my lap for a long minute. I didn't move. I don't know if I was breathing. My mind ran through the past few months. The gentle suggestions from Ryan. Mom, maybe we should simplify your accounts. And Mom, you shouldn't worry about the house upkeep at your age. And Mom, just trust me with the paperwork. At the time, I thought it was kindness. Now it felt like preparation. My pulse thudded in my ears. I reached for my phone almost by instinct, scrolling to Dean Lawson's number. He was my late husband's closest friend, a man who had helped us with property, forms and wills for decades. If there was anyone who could tell me whether I was imagining danger or staring straight into it, it was Dean. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep, but warm. I apologized for the hour. He told me not to be ridiculous, that I could call him anytime. Dean, I whispered, I need you to listen. I told him everything, not in anger, not even in panic, just fact by fact, steady and clear. The way you speak when the truth is too heavy to dress up. When I finished, the line was quiet. I heard him inhale deeply. Nora, he said finally, none of this is legal. Without your signature. Not the construction, not the loan, not the changes they're making to the property. He paused before adding, this isn't a misunderstanding. They're drowning and they're trying to pull you in with them. His words landed like stones in my chest. Get some rest, he said. I'll be there first thing in the morning. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, surrounded by papers that felt less like documents and more like evidence. A faint wind rattled the window. The house felt bruised. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders and sank slowly onto the bed, the weight of everything pressing down. Somewhere between exhausted and wide awake, one truth settled deep inside me. I had trusted them to care, and instead they had planned a life that didn't include me at all. Morning came slowly, as if even the sun hesitated to touch a house that no longer felt like mine. I woke before my alarm, though I hadn't truly slept. My head buzzed with the echo of Dean's voice from the night before. None of this is legal without your signature. I moved through the hallway with my phone in hand, documenting everything he'd asked for. The exposed wiring hanging like tangled vines from the ceiling. The sawdust settling in the grooves of my dining table. The empty spaces where cabinets used to be, leaving behind pale ghost shapes on the walls. Even the boxes in the garage stacked carelessly and labeled in handwriting that wasn't mine. One of them had my wedding album sticking out from under a crock pot I hadn't used in years. The sight of it made my chest tighten. I took a picture. Anyway, by 9, a familiar whistle drifted up the driveway. I opened the door before Dean could knock. He stood there in his worn brown jacket, wind pressing his gray hair back from his forehead. "You look exhausted," he said gently. "You should see the house," I replied, and stepped aside. He walked in and stopped, his jaw tightening as he surveyed the damage. "This isn't remodeling," he said. "This is demolition." He didn't hesitate. He took out a small notebook and began walking the perimeter of the kitchen, measuring the torn-out wall, checking the wiring, writing down every violation he recognized. I followed him, answering questions when he asked, staying quiet when he didn't. It felt strangely comforting, someone moving with purpose inside the chaos. When we reached the back patio door, he paused. "Is that Mrs. Patel?" he asked. Across the fence, my neighbor stood in her yard pretending to prune her roses. She wasn't fooling anyone. She'd been watching my house all week. "I think she's been here every morning," I whispered. Dean nodded toward the yard. "Let's talk to her." We stepped outside. She glanced up immediately, her face folding into a mixture of concern and relief. "Oh, Nora," she said, lowering her clippers. "I was hoping you'd come out. I've been worried." "Did you see the workers here this week?" I asked. "All week," she said quickly, loud as anything. "I thought you were supervising." From inside, I wasn't home. Her eyes widened. "But your daughter-in-law said you approved everything. She told the foreman you were just letting them handle it so you wouldn't stress." Dean exchanged a look with me, subtle but sharp. "Would you be willing to confirm what you saw?" he asked her. "Of course," she said. "Whatever Nora needs." Inside again, Dean made a call to the city building department. He spoke calmly, professionally, but there was a steel edge to his voice as he described unpermitted structural work, unauthorized demolition potential, misuse of property for financing. He sent the photos, his notes, everything. They told him an inspector would be sent out within a few hours. Ryan came home before they arrived. I heard his car door slammed before he walked into the kitchen, eyes darting between me and the notebook on the table. "What is going on?" he asked. I asked Dean to take a look. I said, "Mom, you didn't have to involve other people. We said we were handling it." "You weren't," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. Before he could respond, Chloe hurried in behind him, still wearing her hospital scrubs. She froze when she saw Dean, then looked at me with a mix of irritation and disbelief. "Is this really necessary?" she asked. "We're family." A knock came at the door before I could answer. It wasn't gentle. It was official. A man in a city windbreaker stood on the porch. "Mrs. Nora Whitfield. I'm Mark Collins, with the building department." I stepped aside. "Come in." He moved through the house with an authority that made the walls seem even more exposed. He examined everything with practiced eyes, asking who hired the contractors, where the permits were, who authorized the work. Ryan tried to explain. Chloe jumped in with phrases like safety, upgrades, and family living space. Then, Mr. Collins turned to me. Ma'am, did you sign any documents approving this construction? No, I said. Not a single one. He nodded once, then went to the front door, pulled an orange sheet from his clipboard and taped it firmly to the frame. Effective. Immediately, he said, all work on this property must stop. This is a city order. Silence, heavy, splintering. Chloe looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. Ryan stared at me with something between betrayal and fear. You brought the city on us? He whispered. I lifted my chin, feeling my spine straighten. No, I said, you brought this on yourselves when you decided my home, and my consent didn't matter. For a long moment after the inspector left, none of us spoke. The house was silent in a way that pressed on the lungs, like we were all afraid to breathe wrong. Ryan finally sank into one of the dining chairs, the only piece of furniture not buried under tools or dust. He looked defeated in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Mom, he said quietly, I never meant for it to get this far. I sat across from him, folding my hands to keep them from shaking. Then why didn't you stop before it did? He stared down at the ruined floor. Because I was scared. Because everything in my life feels like it's slipping at once. Work cut my hours. The hospital cut Chloe's. The bills keep coming. I kept telling myself I'd fix it before you ever had to know. Chloe leaned against the doorway, exhaustion softening her edges. We shouldn't have touched the house. We convinced ourselves we were doing something smart, something that could save everyone. But we didn't think about what it would cost you. I looked between them. My son, who once hid behind my legs when the waves were too loud, and the woman who had been trying so hard to keep her family afloat. She forgot where she was standing. My anger hadn't disappeared, but it shifted, making space for something heavier and more human. You both made terrible decisions, I said. You hurt me. You broke my trust, but you didn't do it out of cruelty. You did it out of fear. Ryan's voice cracked. I don't want to lose you, Mom, or this house, or everything. You won't, I said softer. Now. But things have to change. Starting with honesty, he nodded, wiping his face with the back of his hand. We'll fix the house, all of it. We'll cover the costs. And we won't touch a single nail without your permission. Chloe, step closer, and we'll tell you everything. No more hiding. I let out a long breath, one that seemed to ease the tightness in my chest. I don't want to be pushed out of my own life, but I won't let you drown alone either. Ryan reached across the table, hesitant, like he wasn't sure he had the right. I placed my hand over his. The house was still broken, but something in us, something more important, had finally begun to mend.